Welcome back to another episode of the Wilderness Fitness Podcast. Today I'm joined with Jay Rodney. He's a sleep specialist out of Pennsylvania, and he and I ran into each other at Mountain Archery Fest back in May and talked about sleep for about a half an hour, 45 minutes at the booth, and decided that we should hop on a podcast. And here we are in July, a couple months later, finally getting it done.
Yeah, man, it's pretty cool. I've been looking forward to this, man.
I'm glad to finally hop on. We've got a few cool topics to talk about. So I'm excited to see where this conversation goes.
Yeah, man, there's gonna be some interesting information. Apologize in advance because it's not all good news.
Right. Yeah, that's nice to know.
People might be like, wait a minute, that's me. There's not a lot of really good information about sleep and how important it is in our life and what it does for us. So that's why I think it's so easy to take it for granted and to kind of cut it short more often than not from a social perspective. I mean, we're always trying to get that, extra couple of things done or that couple extra emails sent and check the socials or whatever. And it's like, you should be sleeping right now. You know what I mean?
Right.
But that's just kind of, where we come as a culture. So the more information we get out there about it, man, the more people are going to start to realize, like, I got to take this seriously.
Right. Yeah. It's just as important as getting in the gym, just as important as getting outside, get some fresh air. Your diet, it's a third of our life, or we should be doing it a third of our life. So it's something that should definitely be highlighted more than what it is.
Absolutely, it's a very crucial practice. I use that term loosely, but it's something that we really need to take it seriously because it has such a gigantic impact on every aspect of our life, of our health, all that stuff. So yeah, this is a great opportunity, and hopefully some people get some good stuff out of this.
Yeah, I'm sure they will. Before we dive in, why don't you give a little background on who you are and how your background on sleep and sleep studies and all that?
Yeah, so up until about a year and a half ago, I spent 15 years in sleep medicine field. I was a polysomnographer, which is basically a real fancy way of saying a sleep technologist. So I spent time diagnosing and treating sleep disorders, narcolepsy, sleep apnea, stuff like that. So I did that, registered probably about 3 or 4 years after I started in sleep medicine. It takes a while to learn that practice. But once I got registers there, I moved into a second registry, which kind of really leaned me into a lot of the background and the neurological side of sleep, not just the sleep medicine side, but sleep as a whole. I just kind of got intrigued by it and jumped in with both feet and just started learning as much as I could about it. I took a lot of cues from my personal life. I found sleep medicine by way of my grandmother. She needed a CPAP machine, and she was really nervous about getting it. So she asked me to come up and sit with her while the medical equipment company showed her the machine, and that poor girl that showed up had no idea what she was in for. Because I hit her with like 40 questions. Poor girl just wanted to get out of there. But I was so intrigued by it. I was like, this is crazy. This is so cool. How does this work? And why does it do this? So that kind of started me on my path. All these little things started popping up in my life that related back to sleep. And it was just, I was blown away by how many parts of our life it touches. So I kind of did a deep dive into that, the social perspective on sleep and how it impacts different aspects of our life. And it was great. It was a very rewarding career. I lost my job in healthcare in 2021. They closed the sleep lab I was working at. I was on a little bit of a 3-week, let's figure this out. I put a post on Facebook of all things. Listen, I don't want to be involved in healthcare anymore. It's just not what it used to be. Looking for something different. Next morning, I got a call from Matt Gaddis. He is the executive director of a place called Camp Freedom here in Northeast PA. Which is where you and I met. So I've been at Camp Freedom since January of last year, and absolutely love it. Absolutely love it. It's a very opposite end of the spectrum of what I was doing.
Totally.
By a mile. But basically, we're an outdoor adventure camp, and we specialize in serving everything from disabled first responders, Gold Star families. It's a nonprofit company doing some pretty cool things in the outdoor space, helping people find healing from PTSD and all different types of things like that. We help them kind of navigate that through the outdoors. So
Yep.
it's pretty cool thing. I've always been involved in the outdoors. I've always been into hunting and fishing and, you know, all that stuff. And now I get to kind of do the stuff I would do in my free time for a living.
It's not a bad deal.
Not at all. Not at all.
The first topic that I wanted to talk about, wanted to touch on, it's a pretty broad topic, but sleep and performance, like sleep in, you know, performance in the weight room, performance on the track, or on the bike, really running, jogging, hiking, backpacking, anything. Kind of the implications that sleep, like going through the different stages of sleep, what happens with each stage, the importance of hitting all the sleep cycles, just not REM sleep. And yeah, we'll start with those two.
Yeah, that's a really good one. You know, the thing with sleep is it's like a rabbit hole full of rabbit holes. You know what I mean? Because like there's so many different topics it can stray off into because
Yeah.
it's so vast, you know. But that's really a big one. And I think that's one that's going to really relate to your audience is that, you know, kind of that spectrum. So to kind of give you a really brief summary on what sleep is, how it's built, sleep is kind of comprised of 4 different stages, right? You have your stage 1, you know, they're really creative with naming everything, you know, stage 1, stage 2, stage 3. And then they get real creative with REM, you know, that's about the only creative one they came up with. But, you know, each stage has its own little processes and is responsible for doing certain things, but they all kind of focus on very similar things, which is regenerating your body, your mind, stuff like that. And every time you go through those 4 stages, that's one cycle, right? So normal adult needs 3 to 5 cycles per night. So you have all this stuff going on when basic knowledge of sleep is I close my eyes, I wake up, and I go about my day. That's the main kind of understanding of what sleep is. But it's a pretty complex procedure going on inside your melon. So, you know, when you disrupt all those stages, you know, it's going to start to have an impact on how your body works, right? So with you being in the physical therapy realm, right? One of the things that we used to kind of really focus on is you have a person who has a massive stroke and loses, you know, the use of their left arm, things of that nature. So you get into physical therapy to start to kind of bring back those abilities. And what people don't realize is there's a term, it's called offline learning, right? So when you start to learn a new task, whether it's shooting a bow or playing the piano or something, you're starting to learn this new process. You know, you learn while you're awake, you practice this discipline. When you go to sleep, your brain will now do what's called offline learning. So your brain will start to replay that task and replay those things over and over again. So when you wake up the next day, just from one good night's sleep, you can increase your proficiency by 20 to 30% just by having a good night's sleep. And it's like, you know, one day you say playing a piano and you're ding, 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 ding. It sounds terrible. Then you wake up the next day and you kind of got it. Well, how did that happen? Right? Your brain kind of figured it out when you were sleeping. These are things that sleep does for us, that when you're talking about performance, if you're athletes, people who are prone to injury, these things that happen to heal you at night when you're sleeping, those all that's huge for rebounding from working out, weightlifting, right? Start lifting weights, you're creating these little micro injuries as you're lifting weights. And when you sleep, you need those to repair themselves. Having a good night's sleep is what's going to do that for you. HGH, I'm sure you've probably heard of HGH, right? HGH, human growth hormone. That's something, you know, when you're talking about the sports world, you know, people think that that's some sort of steroid. You know, when you hear a baseball player got suspended for using HGH, you're like, oh, that must be really bad stuff. No, your brain makes that. You know what I mean?
That's
so
natural to us.
Right. It's just sometimes it doesn't make enough to heal you as fast as you would like. HGH, it's something that our body manufactures to help us heal bone, muscle, tissue, stuff like that. And that's primarily released into your body during 3rd stage of sleep, right? So if you're not getting that good sleep, you're not healing properly, which makes you more prone to injury, whether you're running, jogging, you know, stuff like that, or if you're lifting weights or you're competing in some football, baseball, basketball, you roll an ankle, you know what I mean? You're going to be back on track a lot quicker if you're getting better sleep. To give you an idea, like if you're getting less than 6 hours or less of sleep a night, that can drop your testosterone levels for a guy down to an equal of 10 years your senior. So it really screws
No
with your
kidding.
testosterone. It messes up the hormones, leptin, ghrelin, the hormones that are responsible for your diet.
Yep.
There's so much that happens at night when you compromise those systems. It's gonna catch up to you sooner than later. The physical aspect of that, it's huge. It's huge. I mean, all these sports teams. Go ahead. You have a
So how
question?
quick, yeah, so how quickly, going back to the testosterone thing, because I think that's starting to become like guys getting on prescription tests to get them back to where, like, quote unquote, their normal is for their
Sure.
age. How quickly does it take to get back to their normal if they're getting less than 6 hours of sleep, and then they hear this podcast and like, hey, I need to start sleeping more, and they just start to get more than 6 hours, like going through that, would that be five sleep cycles, getting that 7.5? How many weeks, how many months does it take to kind of reverse those changes?
That depends on a lot of things. Honestly, it depends on everything from diet to your normal testosterone levels, but it could be just a few weeks. You could be
Oh,
back
okay.
up to normal. The body's an incredible thing on how it operates and how it
Yeah.
repairs itself.
Yep.
One thing that you won't do is make up. People's like, well, I'll sleep more tomorrow and I'll make up for the lost sleep. Unfortunately, it doesn't work that way.
Right.
Once the sleep is lost, the sleep is gone. So you can make positive changes to start to sleep better, but it's not like, like I'll deprive my sleep to maybe 5 hours tonight, but tomorrow I get to sleep as long as I want. I'll sleep longer, but I'm only going to regain maybe 20 or 30% of what I would normally get with if I got 8 hours of sleep. You know what I mean?
Okay.
So it's that drastic of an anomaly.
So can you bank sleep? So say someone's going on a big trip and they know they're going to be up in Alaska, a Dall sheep hunt, right? They're going to be up in
Yeah.
Alaska, and the days are very long, the nights are very short. It doesn't really get dark. Bring a blindfold, bring some earplugs, bring some stuff to make the room quiet in the dark, right? If the
Mhm.
room's not going to be quiet in the dark, make it quiet and dark. But can they bank sleep? Say they leave on a Thursday. Can that, from the Thursday to the Thursday, can they bank sleep up for maybe to get them through those first few days, to help them through that time change and help them with that initial process of not getting as much sleep? Or does it not work like that?
No, unfortunately, it doesn't work like that. We can do that with certain things, like with fat cells. We can bank fat cells, right?
Yep.
So, but that's an evolutionary thing. You know what I mean? We, through our evolutionary process, we've come through times of feast and times of famine. So during times of feast, we stock up on our calories, we stock up on fat, so that way when we come into famine, we can live off that. So our bodies evolved over 3.5 million years or whatever it was. You know what I mean? To
Right.
be able to build that process. When it comes to sleep, not sleeping properly is a very new prospect for humans as a species. I mean, until really Thomas Edison started creating electricity and light bulbs and taking darkness away from the night, we slept like we should. And back in the 1940s, the average night sleep was like 7.9 hours a night. Now
Really?
we're under 6.5 right now. We're the only species on the planet that compromises their sleep for no apparent reason whatsoever.
Right. Except for
So,
to scroll through social media.
right. So Thomas Edison, I think, screwed us all up with that. We can
Yeah.
blame him, you know.
Right.
Um,
We got to blame somebody.
that's right, but when you take somebody and you put them into an environment where there's very little light and except for daylight, and it take a little while, but you can start to reset what's called your circadian rhythm. So your circadian rhythm is basically your brain's ability to tell night from day and sleep from wake. And our bodies finds its way into sleep via temperature versus light. Now, light has a big part of how we sleep and when we sleep, that type of thing. But in order to fall asleep, we need to drop our body temperature by 2 to 3 degrees Fahrenheit. So sometimes it's hard to do that. That's why sometimes it's hard to sleep in a hot room, or if it's really bright, that has an impact. I'm sure you've heard of melatonin, right? Everyone's heard of melatonin.
Yeah.
Melatonin is more sensitive to dark. When light will actually impact melatonin in a negative way. So the
Okay.
brighter the room is, the more light we're in, the less melatonin we're going to produce. And that becomes a factor as well. But kind of going back to the whole time change, right? Melatonin is great for something like that. A lot of people take melatonin as a sleep aid. Doesn't really work that way either. So
Okay,
melatonin isn't,
yeah,
it's not something you can take to go to sleep. Melatonin kind of sets everything up to sleep, and then the rest has to take over and make that process happen. But you can kind of hack jet lag with melatonin. That's the only way I use it. Like I was telling you, I was out to Las Vegas. My brother lives out there.
yep,
So I got to go 3 hours back in time, and not in time, but you understand what I'm saying,
yep, yep.
the time zones get you all thrown off. So I'll use melatonin because my melatonin peak is going to be at a different place on the East Coast than it would be on the West Coast. So I could
Yeah.
supplement melatonin to get my sleep cycle back on track quicker. So it's kind of like a little bit of a way to hack jet lag. But other than that, it's not really going to do much for you.
So how did you do that then? Explain how. So there's a 3 hour time difference from you going to
Mhm.
Pennsylvania to Vegas. How did you
Yeah.
do that? What does that look like? What is your normal bedtime in Pennsylvania? And then how did you try to recreate that with this melatonin supplementation out in Vegas?
Yeah. So the day I travel, I don't take it because you don't know. Because honestly, a good example is my flight got pushed when we we're leaving. I was supposed to arrive in Vegas at like 1 a.m. I didn't get there till the sun was up. So from the flight being pushed back and delayed and whatnot, it was just a mess. And I've got 3 teenage boys I was dragging along with my wife and I, so it was a bit of a disaster. But once I get there, so I would start to supplement my melatonin where I would go to bed at 10 o'clock here. That's 7 o'clock on the West Coast, right? So I would wait a day and then I would start to take melatonin at like 5 o'clock. Now, I don't want to go to sleep at 7 o'clock, but I want to start to bring my melatonin levels up a little bit earlier. That way, when it is so out there, when I'm ready to go to bed at, well, of course, I wasn't going to bed at my normal bedtime because
Right.
we're having a good time. I have my brother lives out there. So I haven't seen him in a couple of years. So, the first night was a bit of a disaster. I might get into that too because it's relevant. I'll start to kind of build those levels up a little bit so that I don't have such a lag in trying to sleep, and it really sets me up to be successful the following day. So the day one is basically a wash. You're going to have struggles. And if you have tough time sleeping as it is, it's going to be a little tough for you, but it's going to make that transition a little bit easier. I talk to a few people who like to use melatonin regularly,
Yeah.
and I mean it's not something that is going to be really harmful to you. The only time where I could see taking melatonin on a regular basis is if you start getting like when you get older, your circadian rhythm starts when you're like 70s and 80s. Your circadian rhythm can kind of get blunted a little bit. So it's hard to really tell your brain when it's time to sleep and when not. So you can kind of supplement with that. But the only downside to taking melatonin regularly is melatonin is a hormone that your body produces. If you start to supplement it too much, your body says, well, I don't have to produce it anymore.
Yeah.
So
Okay.
it
Yep.
can start to kind of decrease the amount of melatonin that your body naturally produces. So if you do stop taking it, well, now you're kind of in a bit of a hole.
Right. So
That's why I never really recommend doing it for much more than a very short term.
yeah, there's a whole slew of questions that I have from that, but real quick, like ideal temperature, I've read between like 62, 63 degrees and like 68 degrees. Is that about right? You want the
Yeah,
room a little bit cooler?
yeah, for sure. Cool, dark, consistency is big. You know what I mean? I try to go to bed at 10 o'clock all the time. Like when I'm home, I try to go to bed at 10 o'clock, even on the weekends. I try to stay
Yep.
consistent because I
Yep.
struggle with sleep terribly. I had chronic insomnia, which was brought on ironically from my job, from doing sleep medicine. I would spend half the week working at night and then half the week trying to sleep at night. And flip flopping your circadian rhythm like that, it catches up with you. And I did administration for a couple of years, but working nights, it's tough.
Yeah.
To the point where like nighttime shift work where people will go on third shift, then second shift, and then first shift and back to third shift. I think it was maybe, I don't recall what it was. It was a few years ago. The World Health Organization actually deemed that as a possible carcinogen, having sleep shift work like that. It's that
Really?
it messes your body up that much to where you have a higher risk of cancer. Colon, prostate, and breast, I think, were the three cancers that you're more likely to contract because of just that weird shift in sleep.
With the melatonin supplementation, a spin off of that, sleep aids like ZQuil or NyQuil or any of these other things, Tylenol PM, like any of these other things that people are taking as far as over the counter medication or prescription, what happens to their sleep cycle when they take that stuff? Is the sleep quality as good? Like if someone takes it consistently, right? Someone's like, I have
Yeah,
to, if I don't have my uh, nighttime cocktail as in the medications to help them sleep, I'm not going to fall
sure.
asleep. Well, are they actually getting decent sleep with all that medication? Does that medication allow them to get through all the cycles, or how does that all work with someone that has to
N-
do that?
Not necessarily, because those are typically sedatives. So sedation is not sleep; it's completely different, and they get kind of blurred a lot, you know. But and a lot of those, like ZQuil and stuff like that, a lot of those are alcohol based. Alcohol is one of the worst things you can do for sleep. You know, like I'm going to have a nightcap or whatever. You know, I'm going to have a glass of whiskey before I go to bed. You know, a glass of whiskey, a glass of wine, it's not going to hurt you. But the problem with sedation is you're not going to go through a natural sleep cycle that way. So you might miss out on deep sleep, like delta sleep, which would be like your stage 3. You might miss out on a good chunk of REM sleep. It can fragment your sleep because it impacts your central nervous system, and as opposed to your central nervous system impacting your body. Does that make
Right.
sense?
Yep.
So you're
It's
kind
kind of
of
like
reversing it.
yep.
Yeah.
And the central
So
nervous
the,
system is the brain and the spinal cord for the listeners. If you're not too familiar with the body, the brain and the spinal cord makes up the central nervous system.
right. So that's, that has a big impact on that. So you're going to fragment your sleep. You'll have all these, like they call it, like, almost like a micro sleep, where you'll sleep for a few minutes and then you'll snap awake and then you'll fall back to sleep and snap awake, and which is a similar thing that happens with things like sleep disordered breathing. It fragments your sleep to where instead of getting a big cycle over and over to 3 to 5 times throughout your evening, you'll be lucky to get through one cycle. So you may not, and during that cycle, you may not get into REM sleep. You may not get into delta sleep because of all the disruptions. And that's where it starts to have a huge impact on your health, to the tune of things like diabetes, type 2 diabetes, I should clarify,
Yeah.
type 2 diabetes, congenital heart failure, high blood pressure. I know a lot of people that have high blood pressure and they take medication for it. There's a good chance if you have high blood pressure and you're otherwise healthy, there may be a sleep issue. If you
Yep.
take 2 medications for hypertension, that's like a 70% chance that you've got sleep apnea or some sort of sleep disorder breathing. And it's very common for people to be on 2 different medications for blood
Yep.
pressure. Stroke and heart attack, they go up by 40 to 60%. It's just radical how risky it is. You know what I mean? To kind of cut all that stuff short. So by
Right.
sedating yourself, it might help. And if I could say it would help in any way, it would be to establish a consistency. You know what I mean? Like if you take it
Yeah.
to where you're going to bed at 9 o'clock every night, you take a ZQuil or you take a Benadryl, whatever it is, to kind of help you get into your sleep. It would be again a short-term thing just to try to get you to establish some consistency, because it
Okay.
does. It's a different ball game. It's a whole different animal.
Yeah, that's kind of what I thought too, but I wanted to double check with you to see what that actually is, because I've got patients that are like, I just take my cocktail before I go to bed, or I've got friends that do that too. It's like, I don't think that's actually helping you get any better sleep. Like you may be asleep the entire time, but if you feel up, if you wake up feeling tired still, like it's obviously not working. You might be asleep, but you're not getting the good sleep, right?
Yeah. It's sleep. It's not quality sleep, and that's what we're after. It's more quality than quantity. I'd rather have 5 or 6 good hours of sleep than 10 hours of fragmented sleep.
Yep.
You're going to feel worse. It's just
Yep.
because you're not going to get really anything out of it. You're basically unconscious for a couple of hours, and there's
Right.
really not enough. There's nothing going on that's really advantageous to your body.
Right. Right. What is your opinion on taking a nap?
Naps are great, but they're not meant to supplement a good night's sleep.
Yep.
Like there it's a tricky thing because naps can be great. And again, to kind of touch on the whole sleep disorder breathing thing, if you have something like sleep apnea, naps are pointless. They're going to do nothing for you. You're better off just sucking it up and getting done what you need to get done, because sleep is severely compromised in that. And maybe we'll touch on that in a little bit. But
Yeah.
naps, if it's something like I'm tired and I gotta drive for 3 hours in a little bit, Absolutely. Power down if you can. I'm a big fan of power naps when I can. It just helps me refresh, but it's not going to help if you're not getting good quality sleep to begin with.
Right. It's kind of like the diet side of things where supplements are great, but you should get it from your food first. If you're not getting it from don't look for
Mhm.
supplements to be your diet, right? Same thing with a
Yeah.
nap. Don't look for your nap to be your sleep. Your sleep should be your sleep, and nap should just be, hey, I'm tired, in the middle of the afternoon,
Yeah.
let's take a little siesta.
That's it. I worked out a little hard today, so I got to go. I'm going out with my friends tonight, so you know what? I'll power down for 2 hours or something like that. Absolutely. If you have time to take a nap, it's never a bad thing if you have the time and you want to. Absolutely, but to lean on that and turn that into a crutch for sleeping 5 hours a night, that's not
Right.
going to help too much. Not
Okay.
going to do too much for you.
What is the ideal nap time?
90 minutes minimum. That's your average sleep cycle. So it takes
Okay.
about 90 minutes to go through the 4 stages of sleep and complete one cycle. Now that's on average.
Yep.
Your mileage
Some
may
people,
vary. You know what I mean?
right. So the 20-minute power nap, you're not a fan of?
It all depends on the situation. It's not going to do much for you, but I forget who it was that what was it? There was a saying that I used to love. It was the most effective pharmaceutical on the planet is the placebo effect.
Yeah. Yep.
Hey man, if it helps you, it helps you. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? If in your brain it's doing something for you, have at it. You know what I
Okay.
mean? But from a biological standpoint, 20 minutes isn't going to be enough to really do much for you.
Okay. So you want to shoot for that hour and a half.
If you could, you know what I mean? Like I said, if you're beat and you got to drive or you've got to do something that, takes, a lot of motor skill or hand-eye coordination or something like that, and you're to the point where you're really starting to doze off, get what you can.
Yep.
It's better than nothing,
Yep.
certainly.
Okay.
But there's just not a lot. It's not going to gain you too much though.
So someone who there's two little questions here with this. Someone who works nights, you talked about you work nights and then you try to sleep at night. Is that the recommendation? Like try to do that, and then off of that, yeah, let's pair them together. And then someone who's used to getting less sleep, like even someone who works nights or days, they're used to getting like 3 or 4, maybe 5 hours of sleep, but 3 or 4 hours of sleep.
Yeah.
They function well. They've done that for years, and then they get an adequate amount of sleep in one night, and they wake up feeling more tired. How do you explain that? Are those two questions? Can you kind of talk about them both?
Sure. Well, what I'll do is I'll break it up, but yeah, absolutely. So the night shift thing, that comes back to consistency, right? If you're not consistent with your sleep, your body doesn't know what to do with itself, for lack of a better term, right? Night shift workers are a little different than shift work. So I don't want to assume everyone knows these terms. So shift work is basically you'll do maybe a month on third shift, then you'll switch for a month to second shift, and then the next month you're on first shift and you back it up, and you're always switching up. That should be illegal in my opinion. That's one of the worst things you could do to somebody health wise. But night shift workers, I was a night shift worker for a long time, and if you can consistently maintain that, that's fine. I have a friend of mine, him and his wife also do sleep medicine, and their kids are older and grown. So they, even on their days off, they're up at night, they sleep during the day. So they maintain that consistent schedule. If you can't maintain that, like myself, where I had young kids, I couldn't just stay up all night and sleep all day on my days off. I had to be around for my kids, So that was where I started to fall into, issues with chronic insomnia that actually I still suffer from it now. This is a year and a half later. I mean, I don't know if I'll ever get away from it totally. It's gotten better, but it can be really challenging, especially with what I do for a living. I mean, I'm running heavy equipment a lot, and we're out in the woods and climbing trees and all kinds of crazy stuff. So
right, you got to have your head on.
You do. We're around firearms all the time, so it's you got to kind of be with it. So it does catch up with me, but I got to communicate that with the people I work with. So as long as we're all on the same page, I mean, it's not like, you're tired again, you sissy, no, they understand where I'm coming from. They know what's going on, so they get it. But I don't want to put anybody else in jeopardy because I didn't sleep good, right? So the night shift thing, it's tricky. It's not an easy schedule to maintain, but it's doable without having too much of a negative impact on you. It's just maintaining that. But that's something where diet's important, exercise is important. If you become too sedentary, which is a big part of our culture right now, then it's going to catch up to you, and you're going to have health issues, no question.
Right.
So the second part of the question, run that one by me one more time.
So someone who's used to getting less sleep, they get 3 or
Okay.
4 hours, 4 hours of sleep or so. They go through a couple
Mhm.
sleep cycles, and then on the weekend, or say at some point during the week, they have an off day. It's like a holiday, and they're allowed to sleep in, and somehow by the grace of God, they sleep in and get 6 hours of sleep. So they go through 4 sleep cycles, and they
Yeah.
wake up and they just feel like dog crap all morning, and
Yeah.
it lasts lasts for the rest of the day. Like, how do you explain that? Like, yeah, how do
So
you go ahead and explain that to the person? How do you convince them
sure.
to continue with the proper amount of sleep?
So there is they discovered a gene that people can do well on 5 hours of sleep. So there are people out there who can do that, but it's, for again, lack of a better term, it's a genetic mutation. So they don't know just yet, like, is there a cost to that? Is there a downside to it? Is there a negative implication to that? They're not quite sure yet, unless they may be, and I'm just not aware of it. But there was a study they did a couple of years back, and they found that there are certain people, but you're more likely to get struck by lightning than to be one of those people. When it comes to the general population, let me see. There's a gentleman. His name is Dr. Mike. It's Matthew Walker. And the guy is like the Joe Rogan of sleep. You know what I mean? This guy, I love him. He's fantastic. He has a book called Why We Sleep. That guy's legit. And he summed that up with as if you took all the people, rounded them up to a whole number, and expressed it as a percentage, it's 0. So that's how few people there are out there that actually can do that in a healthy manner. They may be that person, or there could be other issues at play. You know what I mean? There's a lot. The biggest downside to sleep is, and when it comes to like evolution, if we didn't need sleep, it would be the biggest evolutionary folly in the history of humans. Like,
Right.
we kind of need that when we're asleep. The negative side of being asleep is that we can't fend off predators. We're not seeking out a mate. Like, there's all these things that we should be doing as a species. And again, it's bigger than modern times, right? Sleep has been around as long as humans have been around. So right. The last 150 years or so we flipped it on its head. But like, from an evolutionary perspective, I mean, it's kind of crazy that we are out unconscious, not knowing what's going on in our environment, and there's a good reason for it, right? So when we're sleeping, we have no idea what's going on with our body, right? We're not supposed to, right? That's kind of how it works. So when we're asleep, we don't know what we're doing. How many people have you said, hey, you snore? No, I don't. No, bro, you do.
Right.
You know what I mean? I had a patient one time. He's saying he came in for a sleep apnea test, and he said, my wife's been after me for years to do this, and I kept telling her she was crazy. She's like, and I went to hunting camp. He's like, in the first night, I woke up the next morning on my bed outside. All the other guys picked up his bed, carried him outside, and put him out in the woods because he was snoring so loud. And that was what the tipping point to get him to come and get a sleep study. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So people have no idea what's going on. So if you're sleeping for 8 hours and you feel like crap, there's a good chance you've got something going on while you're sleeping that's no bueno. Whether it be snore arousals or sleep disordered breathing or something going on in the background that you're unaware of. That's the only thing that would really make you feel like a dog turd waking up after 8 hours of sleep.
Maybe this might be more my realm, but as far as like beds go, I get a lot of questions about beds and pillows and stuff, and that's all. To me, it's personal preference. Like, I prefer a bed that it's not like a cloud when I get into it, but it's also not a piece of plywood, right? A cast or mattress is what I like. Same thing with a pillow. I don't want a pillow that my head, like, it feels like my head is just sunk into the pillow, but I also want a pillow it's not a piece of, or it's a a bag of rocks, right? So the happy medium. Some people are total ends of the spectrum though. Like if someone comes to me with a problem, I'm like, well, you got to change it, right? It's a problem because it's like your body's not liking it. Your back hurts
Right.
because you sleep, or when you're sleeping, you wake up in the morning, your back is killing you. Obviously, what you're doing right now is not working. You either need to get a new bed, or if the bed's brand new, because I'll get that too. Like, I just bought this bed. And it's like, well, I'm sorry to tell you, but so I'll give them some pointers like try putting something underneath your knees to bend your knees. That puts your lumbar spine in a better position. Neck position, we'll check the pillows with the neck position. Your head shouldn't be tilted back like you're looking behind you, and shouldn't be down into your chest. It should be a happy medium. But if all those things check out, it's like you might just need a new bed. Unfortunately, like I know it's a year or two old, but you might just need a different bed than what you have. Like, do you notice a bed style that seems to be better than another?
At times, I think you hit it on the head. It's personal preference and it's what you're comfortable with. But like
Okay,
you said, if you might be comfortable with a firm mattress, but you wake up and you feel like somebody beat the hell out of you all night, well, you might want to go to the mattress store and lay on a soft one for a little bit, maybe take a nap there and see how it goes.
right,
But when it comes to things like uh, some people will get in a soft bed with a firm pillow and it bends their chin
yep,
into their chest. That's not only good for the natural curve of your neck, but it's also going to start to occlude your airway,
right,
and that's going to make it really hard to breathe normally at night.
right,
Because when we fall asleep, our muscle tone drops off substantially. We basically go limp, for lack of a
right,
better term, because you don't really need
yep,
your muscle tone. And even more so in REM, when you go into REM sleep, you become paralyzed. Your muscle tone shuts off. You become atonic. That's to prevent you from acting out your dreams, so you can dream safely and get through that sleep cycle safely, that sleep stage rather. All the muscle tone, even when you're sitting relaxed on the couch, you have muscle tone in your airway. When you fall asleep, that muscle tone goes away. So if you have an issue with a large tongue, a large soft palate, big tonsils, your soft palate is basically that flap in the back of your airway that separates your nasal passage from your oral passage. Sometimes they're longer than they should be. The uvula, that punching bag thing, that thing, if that's too big, when your muscles relax, all that stuff relaxes with it. So if your airway is already compromised because of, some sort of structural issue, and then you start bending your neck wrong, or you're just sleeping in a weird position, then you're just going to intensify that effect and
right,
make it that much worse. So
right,
being comfortable is one thing, but being smart about it is kind of a whole another ball game. So it
yep,
just try not to get stuff like, they have the beds that they elevate you up, they pick your head up off they used to call them craftmatics back in the day.
yeah,
Those are great, especially for people who snore. If you change the position of your angle, then you can kind of start to change the position of all the material in your airway, to
yep,
where you don't snore as bad. Snoring can be very detrimental to sleep because your brain will arouse. You'll snore so loud sometimes it snaps you awake temporarily to where you don't even realize you're awake, but it brings you out of that deeper stage of sleep into a much more shallow, like a stage one, which is basically your transitional. So when you fall asleep, you go into stage one sleep, and it's kind of like you're just transitioning into deeper sleep. It's like a buffer period. It's like maybe 10% of your total night sleep,
sure,
but you're sleep, but there's nothing good happening really. It's
right,
just like a transitional period. So if you keep ending up there all night long, then you're not really getting the benefits of what your body needs out of it. So snoring can be a big problem that you can treat, sort of. I hate to use that term. You can kind of improve your snoring through changing the angle, using an extra
yep.
pillow. Other than that, I think you hit it on the head. It's personal preference, as long as you're comfortable and it's not creating having any kind of negative impact on you.
Right. Yeah, you should, like, when you wake up, when anybody wakes up, you should feel rested and you should not be in pain, or headaches too is another big one. If you're waking up with
Mhm.
headaches, your tongue could be sliding, like when you relax, your tongue could be sliding back, so then your jaw activates, so you grind your teeth, right? Your jaw activates to get that tongue back up out of the airway. And if you're doing that
Yeah,
all the time, you might wake up with headaches, you might wake up with jaw pain, your teeth hurt. And
sure.
so looking into like a mouthpiece that connects your top and bottom tooth to allow that jaw to stay relaxed. That doesn't really fix the tongue issue. And so maybe changing the bed position, like what you just talked about, that would help fix that tongue issue. Right.
Sure.
But you
Yeah,
should
yeah.
definitely, you should feel good when you wake up. If you're in pain, or you have a headache, or you're feeling still groggy, and tired, something's got to change with their sleep.
Absolutely. Yeah. Headaches are another big symptom of sleep apnea also. There's
Okay.
a lot of symptoms with that. And that's probably one of the things that goes not only untreated, but unrecognized the most out of any, issue out there health-wise. It's sleep apnea is one of the things that flies under the radar the most. And that's, again, something I found just from, doing it for a living for a while, is how many people actually do have it that have no idea. And when we're growing up, what we see and what we're exposed to becomes our normal. So the fact that things like sleep apnea are hereditary, if you grow up and your dad or your grandfather or your aunt or whoever, they hit the recliner and every couple of minutes they stop breathing and they're doing that whole ordeal, you know what I mean? That's normal to you. So when you start doing it, you're like, I'm fine. My father did
older.
that. Right. It's just getting older. He lived to be 50. No, that's not good. You know what I mean?
Right.
It's one of those things that, we perceive these things to be normal. And so it kind of flies under the radar. Everyone thinks that it's just a normal thing. Everyone I've seen that came before me did it. So why am I any different? Why am I abnormal?
Yeah.
So it doesn't get caught, and even screening, like sleep screening, that comes back around to kids. That's a big one with kids, and screening them properly before taking any steps to treating them for what you think they might have. That's a big one. Sleep apnea is a big one, boy, I tell you, and that will destroy your sleep. It'll cost you more than you know. More than you know. I had a patient who was a young guy. He was 25 when he came to the sleep lab. Big dude. He was like 6'6", pushing 300 pounds, monster kid. And sleep apnea cost him a professional football career because he couldn't rebound from the two-a-days. Like, he was working out in college and playing college football, and he was really good. And he just at one point just could not kind of rebound from the workouts fast enough. So he'd have a hard workout. The next day he was a mess. So he would miss a whole day of whatever practice, So came into the sleep lab. I did a study on him and found that the guy stopped breathing 112 times an hour. So you figure 60 minutes in an hour, do the math, and that's all night. Right.
Oh my gosh. So he's always in that stage one.
Yeah, he's not breathing more than he is breathing at night. And we ended up putting him on a BiPAP machine, and it changed the dude's life. Now granted, he missed his window, but I mean, it saved him a huge uphill battle for the rest of his life, even at 25. You know what I mean? Because he was destined for type 2 diabetes and heart attacks and strokes. And it's not an if, it was a when, for a guy like him. But it can be that severe. The worst I'd ever seen was 130 times an hour. That was the most severe case I'd ever seen.
That's crazy.
And that's like every 20 seconds you stop breathing. That's rough. And you have no idea because you're sleeping. So you don't know that's going on.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Unless, especially for someone who's not living with somebody else, single people, or people that, spouses that sleep in opposite rooms, you have no idea what's going on. I mean, you might be sleeping in opposite rooms because you're snoring. So that might be an indicator to go get it checked out.
And believe it or not, it was caught by his optometrist, of all people.
Really?
The optometrist caught it. Yeah, there's a condition called floppy eyelid syndrome. Again, we're real creative with naming this stuff, but your eyelids will start to kind of flop open to where you can see the inside of your lower eyelid. The thing is, the flesh that makes up your eyelids is very similar to the flesh that makes up your upper airway. So if that's starting to flop, odds are that's flopping also. So the optometrist said, have you ever had a sleep study? He's like, no, why would I have a sleep study? He's like, you've got floppy eyelid syndrome, get a sleep study. And sure enough, the family doctor didn't catch it. The cardiologist didn't catch it. The optometrist caught it. It's one of those things, like, there's other people should have caught that. You know what I mean? Even just give them a standard questionnaire, you know what I mean? Just to say, hey, how's your sleep? You know what I mean?
Right. I mean, it's on every intake. Someone's filling out a sleep questionnaire. I have them fill out the Pittsburgh. So to wrap up this sleep and performance, we talked about gym performance a little bit. We touched on life performance because, I mean, life is the ultimate game, right? What is your clinical bottom line for like sleep and performance? What is your clinical takeaway for this little segment that we're doing here?
So they did a study on professional athletes a couple years back, and they asked them all like, how much sleep do you get a night, right? And they put them all in buckets, like 5 hours, 6 hours, 7 hours, 8 hours, And the difference between sleeping 5 hours and 9 hours, you had a 60% higher probability of serious injury in sport. So 60% from sleeping 5 hours to 9 hours. Now that's 4 hours. But even if you went from 6 hours to 8 hours, you're still talking to about 40%, right? So the better you sleep, the better your body's going to react when you're trying to learn a new skill, whether it's martial arts. Like a lot of people are getting into jujitsu now. That's a big one, right?
Yeah.
So if you have to think about it, you're going to lose when it comes to jujitsu. I studied martial arts years ago, never jujitsu, but I have friends of mine who are really big into it. And if you're rolling with somebody and they extend the arm, you grab the arm, you got an arm, like you can't think about it or you're going to miss your window. So that becomes a part of that is being able to visualize these things a lot easier. Things like microbalance, muscles for hiking, running, any kind of Western hunters, guys who are traversing steep inclines, those balance muscles are clutch. You're going to run into, the less sleep you have, the less responsive those muscles and those balance practices are going to become. And you're prone to injury. The better quality sleep you get, the quicker you're going to rebound from injury, whether it's a rolled ankle, a broken bone, a laceration, any of these things, they're going to heal much faster with better sleep than they would otherwise. So, when it comes to performance, the sleep is probably the best performance enhancing thing. I don't want to call it a drug, but it's the best thing out there, and it's free. Good sleep is going to put you ahead of somebody on a similar skill set. You're going to be, well above them with good sleep versus not.
Concentration, reactive balance, all that stuff. Yep. So, all right, man. Sweet. Well, we'll wrap that segment up. And then for this next one, we're going to talk about sleep in the backcountry or sleep while you're camping. It doesn't necessarily have to be in the backcountry, but kind of sleep when you're out away from civilization.